why do you hesitate before acting? Out of fear of making a mistake? Because you want to understand everything first? The truth is that behind this hesitation, there's something deeper hidden. It's precisely the fear of being vulnerable. Think about wild animals. A lion doesn't analyze whether it should hunt. It simply hunts when it's hungry. An eagle doesn't question whether it should fly. It spreads its wings and throws itself into the wind, without thinking twice, without measuring consequences. But you think. You analyze. You dissect every movement before making it. And in that process, something essential gets lost. Remember when you were a child. You cried when you were sad, laughed when you were happy, ran when you wanted to run. There wasn't this distance between feeling and acting. There wasn't this internal observer judging each emotion before releasing it. You simply lived. But then something changed. You learned that the world hurts, that people judge, that making mistakes has consequences. So you created this observation tower inside your mind, a safe place from where you could watch life without needing to truly live it. The problem is that this tower that was supposed to protect you became your prison. Look at yourself now. You don't ask yourself, what do I really want to do? But rather, what happens if I do this wrong? The moment analysis becomes more important than action, you stop living and start only thinking about living. And there's a brutal difference between these two things. Kierkegaard called this the aesthetic man, the one who contemplates all possibilities without ever committing to any. Do you recognize this pattern? The person who analyzes every choice until it loses meaning, who dissects every feeling until it evaporates, who observes relationships from the outside while others surrender from within. There's a disturbing comfort in this position. You don't suffer the consequences of wrong choices because you never truly choose. You don't feel the pain of rejection because you never fully expose yourself. You don't know failure because you never risk enough to truly fail. But you also never live. The analytical mind is a seductive refuge. While the world out there demands decisions, vulnerability, commitment, you can stay in the tower of thought, safe, analyzing patterns, identifying dynamics, understanding mechanisms. It seems productive. It seems deep. But it's just a sophisticated way of running away. Because thinking about life isn't living, the same way reading the menu isn't eating. And the more you think, the less you act. The more you understand, the less you feel. Constant analysis creates a barrier between you and direct experience, the one that truly transforms, the one that truly hurts, the one that truly matters. There's a cruel irony in all of this. You developed this observation capacity precisely because at some point in your life, probably when you were a child, you realized that the world was too dangerous to be lived without filters. So you started watching first, calculating before acting, thinking before feeling. And it worked. This strategy protected you. It gave you an advantage. You started seeing things that others didn't see, predicting consequences that others ignored, understanding dynamics that went unnoticed. But what was supposed to be a tool became a prison. The observer that should serve you is now you. And you don't even notice anymore the difference between choosing to observe and being trapped observing. You look at other people and see how simple they are, how they throw themselves into relationships without thinking about the consequences, how they choose careers without analyzing all the variables, how they feel emotions without questioning them, and you feel superior. After all, you see what they don't see. You understand the dynamics they ignore. You're conscious while they just exist. But this superiority hides something. Fear. The fear of being as vulnerable as they are, of committing as they commit, of living with the intensity they live. So you convince yourself that your analysis is wisdom, that your distance is maturity, that your paralysis is prudence. And there's another layer to this. There's a secret pleasure in feeling different, in believing you see deeper, that you question while others accept, that you're awake while they sleep. This sense of uniqueness feeds the ego in a very particular way. You're not just a person trying to live, you're the conscious observer of the human condition. You're not just someone with connection difficulties, you're too deep to settle for superficialities. You're not just afraid to commit, you're preserving your authenticity. These narratives are comfortable because they transform your limitations into virtues, your isolation into wisdom, your paralysis into depth. And the years pass while you observe. Every decision becomes an exercise in mental dissection. You weigh pros and cons until both lose their weight. You imagine future scenarios until they all seem equally probable and improbable. You question your own motivations until none remain that seem pure enough. And in the end, the only thing that happens is time passing. Because there's a cruel paradox in the search for total understanding before acting. It guarantees you'll never act. Life doesn't wait for you to finish analyzing it. It happens while you're busy trying to understand it. And when you finally think you understand enough to begin, you realize it's already too late, that the moment has passed, that the opportunity has closed. Think about that person you wanted to talk to, but you kept analyzing what to say, how to say it, when the right moment would be, if you were interpreting the signals correctly. And while you were analyzing, they met someone else who simply spoke, without thinking so much. Or that project you wanted to start, but first you needed to research more, plan better, be sure it would work. And while you were planning, someone less prepared but more courageous simply started and is now years ahead. Or that life change you want to make, but you keep calculating risks, imagining what could go wrong, waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. And the years keep passing and you remain in the same place. Not because options are lacking, but because you analyze them all into paralysis. Kierkegaard wrote about the despair of the aesthete, that man who experiences everything but commits to nothing. He cultivates refined sensibilities, develops sophisticated tastes, accumulates diverse experiences, but everything remains on the surface. He tastes everything without ever satisfying the real hunger. He knows many people but doesn't truly bond with anyone. He explores many possibilities but never anchors himself in any concrete reality. And despair arises precisely from this dispersion, from this inability to choose one thing and make it real through commitment. Because authenticity doesn't come from the breadth of experiences, but from the depth of engagement. And you can't engage deeply when you always keep one foot out, when you always reserve a part of yourself to observe. For Kierkegaard, this lifestyle represents a form of despair because the person is desperately trying to avoid being themselves. They try to be all possibilities at the same time to avoid having to choose one and bear its limitations. But the authentic self only emerges through concrete choice, through commitment that excludes other options. When you refuse to choose, you refuse to exist fully. And the perpetual observer is always refusing to choose because choosing means accepting that you're not infinite, that you have limits, that you're someone specific, and not all the abstract possibilities your mind can imagine. This is the true anguish, not the fear of the wrong choice, but the fear of having to be someone defined instead of remaining as pure potentiality. Observing gives us an illusory sense of control. If we can name what we feel, categorize our emotions, identify patterns in our behaviors, we believe we have power over them. Anxiety loses its terror when you can analyze it clinically. Sadness becomes more bearable when you dissect it into chemical components and biographical contexts. Fear diminishes when you explain it through psychological theories. But this is a comforting illusion. You're not processing these emotions, just creating narratives about them. You're not living your feelings, just organizing them into conceptual boxes. And while you do this, real life, the one made of direct experience and not interpretation, slips through the fingers of thought. There's something almost magical in our relationship with words. When we can name something, we feel we've captured it, that we've mastered it. The nameless monster is terrible, but once named, it seems smaller. Except feelings aren't monsters to be tamed. They're experiences to be lived. And when you spend more time naming than feeling, you trade the experience for its description. It's like spending the whole day reading reviews of a movie instead of watching the movie. In the end, you have a lot of knowledge about the experience, but zero real experience. And the worst part is, you might not even notice the difference, because your brain is so trained in concepts that it started confusing the concept with reality. You can have mental clarity about absolutely everything and still feel a devastating emptiness. You can identify behavior patterns in all the people around you, understand complex social dynamics, diagnose others' neuroses with surgical precision. But when you look inside, you only find this cold distance, this dead space between what you know and what you feel. Intellectual clarity doesn't fill the human need for visceral connection. Understanding doesn't replace belonging. Analyzing doesn't replace loving. And all this mental lucidity creates a peculiar loneliness, because you're simultaneously very conscious of everything and very disconnected from everyone. Nietzsche had a radical view on this. For him, excessive consciousness wasn't an evolution, but a disease. A problematic development that distanced humans from their vital instincts, from their capacity for spontaneous action, from their connection with the creative forces of existence. He valued the Dionysian, that impulse to throw yourself into life without the mediation of thought, to create without the paralysis of reflection, to dance without first theorizing about movement. The excessive observer represents exactly what Nietzsche diagnosed as decadence, the replacement of life with the interpretation of life, of doing with thinking about doing, of creation with sterile contemplation. In The Gay Science, Nietzsche argues that consciousness arose only as a communication tool among humans, not as a superior form of existence. Animals live fully without this constant self-awareness. They act, hunt, rest, without ever questioning if they're doing it right, without analyzing their motivations, without paralyzing metacognition. And in this, there's a completeness that the hyperconscious human has lost. Not that Nietzsche advocated a return to pure animality, but he clearly saw how the excess of reflection created a sick human type, incapable of affirming life, because they're always judging it, always weighing it, always distancing themselves from it through thought. For him, true vital force was in the capacity to create values and live by them intensely, not in contemplating possibilities without ever choosing any. There's a brutal difference between feeling an emotion and observing yourself feeling an emotion. The first is total immersion. The second is fragmentation. And the compulsive observer always does the second. Even in moments that should be of complete surrender, joy, sadness, passion, anger, there's always a part of the mind commenting on the moment, analyzing the experience as it happens, measuring the intensity of the feeling, questioning its authenticity. You're never completely present because there's always this internal spectator taking notes. And this constant meta-consciousness destroys exactly what makes an experience transformative. The capacity to lose yourself in it completely, to forget that you exist separate from it. Think about the last time you truly laughed without thinking about the laughter, or cried without analyzing the tears, or felt anger without questioning whether you had the right to feel. For most people who live in this observer mode, these pure experiences happened so long ago they can barely remember what it's like. Because now, even when something intense happens, there's always that voice. Why am I feeling this? Is this authentic or am I performing? How does this look from the outside? How long will it last? What does this say about me? And the more you ask these questions, the less you truly feel. The experience becomes an object of study instead of being simply lived. And in the process, you lose the only thing that makes these experiences valuable: their capacity to transform you through total immersion. Let's be honest about something uncomfortable. Many times, what you call an observant nature, a philosophical tendency, mental depth, is simply fear disguised as wisdom. It's safer to analyze a relationship than to throw yourself into it without guarantees. More comfortable to theorize about life's purpose than to commit to something specific that might fail. Easier to study about courage than to truly be courageous. Philosophy becomes a sophisticated shield against the vulnerability inherent to authentic existence. You convince yourself that you need to understand more before acting, that you need more clarity before choosing, that you need to analyze more before committing. But the truth is, you're just indefinitely postponing the moment of truly living. And the hardest part to accept is that you know this. Deep down, you know you're using analysis as an excuse. You know that relationship you're pondering has had enough time for pondering. You know that career change you're carefully evaluating has been evaluated to exhaustion. You know that project you're planning has been planned beyond necessary. But admitting this would mean admitting the fear. And it's more comfortable to continue the narrative that you're just a careful, thoughtful person who doesn't act impulsively, when in reality, you don't act at all. And there's a giant difference between being careful and being paralyzed, between being reflective and being stuck, between having depth and having fear. The loneliness of the perpetual observer is unique. You can be in a room full of people and still feel that invisible glass wall. You see others laughing without analyzing why the joke is funny, connecting without questioning the authenticity of the connection, being spontaneous without measuring the consequences of each word. and you want to participate, but you can't turn off the voice that comments, that analyzes, that keeps you stuck in the spectator position. Even when you try to surrender to the moment, a part of you remains outside, observing yourself trying to surrender, creating this layer of self-awareness that prevents real immersion. And at the end of the day, you go home with that familiar feeling. You were physically present, but essentially absent. It's like being in a movie where everyone is living the scene and you're the only one who can see the cameras. Everyone is immersed in the reality of that moment, but you see the artificiality, the performance, the structure behind it. And this doesn't make you special. It just makes you lonely. Because while they're connecting, you're mentally documenting. While they're feeling, you're cataloging. While they're living, you're archiving. And when you finally get home, you have all these detailed observations about how people interact, about social dynamics, about behavior patterns, but no real memory of connection. No moment where you forgot yourself enough to truly be with someone. The observer posture kills spontaneity. And spontaneity isn't frivolity, it's the capacity to respond to life directly, without the paralyzing mediation of thought. Authentic relationships require moments of abandon, of saying something without calculating each word, of touching without analyzing the gesture, of revealing yourself without measuring the risks. Genuine creativity requires periods of flow where the critical mind silences and something deeper takes over. But the chronic observer sabotages both because they can never completely turn off analytical mode. There's always that inner voice monitoring, judging, measuring. And what should be connection becomes performance. What should be creation becomes self-criticism. Think about what it's like to hug someone when you're completely present versus when you're observing the hug happening. In the first case, you feel the warmth, the heartbeat, the breathing, the real human connection. In the second, you're thinking, how long should I hold on? Does this look natural? Am I conveying the right emotion? What if the other person finds it weird? The physical hug happens, but the real hug doesn't. Because you weren't there. You were in your head analyzing the hug. And this replicates in everything. You don't kiss, you observe the kiss. Don't dance, observe the dance. Don't converse, monitor the conversation. And in the process, you completely lose what these experiences have that's alive, real, transformative. You probably believe there's a true self observing a false self that interacts with the world. That there's an authentic essence hidden behind social masks, waiting to be discovered through deep introspection. But what if this division is itself a neurotic illusion? Kierkegaard would argue that the authentic self isn't hidden, waiting to be found through observation. It's created through commitment, through concrete choices, through action in the world. You don't discover who you are by sitting around analyzing your psyche. You create who you are through what you do, how you relate, what you choose. Authenticity doesn't come from internal observation, but from external engagement. This idea is radical because it completely inverts the logic of the observer. You think you need to first find yourself to then live authentically. But Kierkegaard would say you find yourself in the act of living authentically. The self isn't a fixed thing waiting to be discovered. It's something you build through your choices, especially those that scare you, those that expose you, those that commit you. When you choose to love someone despite the risks, a part of your true self emerges. When you commit to a path despite uncertainties, you create who you are. The endless analysis is just a way to avoid that terrifying and liberating moment of having to choose and, by choosing, to become. The observer falls into a dangerous cognitive trap, thinking that understanding something equals experiencing it. You read books about love, study its psychological dynamics, understand its neurological mechanisms, analyze its behavioral patterns, and you feel that somehow this counts, that this knowledge fills something. But knowledge about love isn't loving. Theoretically, understanding vulnerability isn't being vulnerable. Studying about courage isn't acting courageously. Life doesn't happen at the conceptual level. It happens at the visceral, bodily, emotional level. And no amount of analysis substitutes for the direct experience of what you're just thinking about. It's the difference between reading about swimming and throwing yourself in the water. You can study every technique, every movement, understand the physics of aquatic displacement, memorize breathing strategies. But until you actually get in the water and feel it supporting or sinking you, it's all theory. And there are people who spend their lives reading swimming manuals, accumulating technical knowledge, but never get wet. Because getting wet is risky. You might swallow water, might get tired, might discover you're not as good as you imagined. It's safer to stay on the shore with your books, maintaining the illusion of mastery through theoretical knowledge. But when you look at people who truly swim, who threw themselves in the water despite the fear, you realize they have something no book can give: the real experience. And then comes the painful awakening. That moment where you realize, with a cutting clarity, that you wasted years, maybe decades, observing when you could have been living. That all this time you spent analyzing, understanding, reflecting, was time you didn't spend loving, creating, risking, being. The strategy you developed to protect yourself from suffering became the prison itself. The distance you cultivated to avoid pain became the emptiness you carry. And now you're here, with all this mental clarity about how life works, but with the anguishing sensation that you never truly lived any of it. It's Kierkegaardian despair in its rawest form, recognizing that you fled from authenticity in the name of understanding. This moment usually arrives when you least expect it. It might be seeing someone younger doing something you always wanted but never had the courage to do. It might be realizing that person you loved has already moved on while you were still analyzing the relationship. It might be looking back and seeing that all that analysis didn't take you anywhere, that you're at the same point as 10 years ago, only now with more theories about why you're stuck. And the pain isn't just recognizing the lost time, it's realizing you did this to yourself, that no one trapped you in this observation tower. You chose to stay there because it seemed safer. And now the price of that safety reveals itself: an unlived life. If you're enjoying this content, check out in the first comment our exclusive ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes. Nietzsche offers a way out, but it's not comfortable. Affirm life in its totality. Not life filtered through analysis, not the safe and controlled version, but life with all its chaos, suffering, and uncertainty. This means abandoning the refuge of the analytical posture and embracing the active creation of meaning. It means choosing something and committing to it, even knowing it might go wrong. It means feeling deeply, even knowing it will hurt. It means acting, even without having all the answers. The observer needs to transform into creator. Needs to stop interpreting life and start living it with the same intensity dedicated to understanding it. And this requires courage, because it means renouncing the illusory security of intellectual control. For Nietzsche, what defines a meaningful life isn't the absence of suffering, but the capacity to say yes to it, even with all the suffering included. He called this amor fati, love of fate. Not passive resignation, but active affirmation. It's the difference between being dragged through life complaining and dancing with it, even when the music is dissonant. The observer can never achieve this because they're always maintaining distance, always reserving the right to judge whether life is being lived correctly. But living isn't a test you can pass or fail. It's an act of continuous creation, and you don't create by staying in the audience analyzing. You create by getting on stage and improvising, even without knowing if it will work out. But maybe it doesn't need to be a binary choice between observing or participating. Maybe true maturity is integrating both capacities. Using consciousness to serve life, not to replace it. Having moments of deep reflection, yes, but alternated with periods of total immersion where you turn off the internal observer and simply exist. Wisdom isn't in always analyzing nor in never thinking. It's in knowing when to observe and when to dive in head first. When to step back to understand and when to move forward without complete understanding. Consciousness can be a powerful tool when you own it, not when you're its prisoner. Think of it this way. A good jazz musician knows music theory deeply, but when they're playing, they're not thinking, now I'm going to use the Dorian scale over this DM7 chord. They simply play. The theory is there, internalized, serving the creative moment, not controlling it. This is the relationship you need to develop with your observation capacity. It can inform your choices without paralyzing them. It can give you perspective without distancing you from experience. It can help you navigate complexity without preventing you from diving into the simplicity of the present moment. But this requires conscious practice of turning off analytical mode when it's not serving. It requires courage to trust instinct sometimes. It requires accepting that not everything needs to be understood to be lived. Because in the end, there's a moment where analysis needs to end and life needs to begin. Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith, That point where you simply need to leap from safe observation to uncertain commitment, without guarantees, without total understanding, without complete control. You'll never have all the information. You'll never analyze sufficiently. You'll never eliminate all risks. And if you wait for that, you'll wait forever on the shore while life flows without you. Living authentically means acting despite uncertainty, choosing despite incomplete analysis, loving despite vulnerability. And this leap isn't a single moment. It's a daily practice. Every morning you wake up and have to choose again. Am I going to stay in the tower observing, or am I going to come down and participate? When that person invites you out and you start analyzing all the reasons why it could go wrong, you have to consciously stop and simply say yes. When that creative idea arises and your critical mind starts listing all the imperfections, you have to choose to create anyway. When that deep feeling appears and you want to dissect it, you have to choose to just feel it. The leap isn't completely abandoning reflection. It's having the courage to live before completely understanding, to act before having absolute certainty, to commit despite the risks. The most important reflection isn't about what you understand, but about what you do with that understanding. You can spend your entire life studying maps, or you can actually travel. You can spend years analyzing relationships, or you can allow yourself to truly love someone. You can contemplate infinite possibilities, or you can choose one and make it real. Life happens outside your head. It's waiting for you to stop observing it and start creating it through your choices. And maybe the courage you need isn't to make the perfect choice, but simply to choose. To commit, to leap, because the greatest tragedy isn't choosing wrong. It's never truly choosing. It isn't suffering the consequences of your actions. It's reaching the end, realizing you never truly acted. It isn't the pain of having lived intensely. It's the emptiness of having only observed while life passed by. So tell me, are you going to keep watching, or are you finally going to get in the game? If this video made you question something deep, and you want to go even deeper in these reflections, consider becoming a member of the club to have access to exclusive content that will help you on this transformation journey. Life is happening now, not after you finish understanding it.